I currently rent an apartment, and I've been told a million times to go out and focus on buying a house as quickly as possible because that is the best financial decision that you can make. Here are 5 reasons why I still continue to rent and I still think it's the best decision for me and a lot of people out there. Hey, nice to see you. If you don't know, my name is Evan. This is My Money Marathon. I create content centered around personal finance and beginner investing, trying to help beginners find methods they can use to build wealth easily and quickly. I'm also very active over on Twitter and Instagram, links below in the description. And in this video, we're going to be discussing why I currently rent an apartment and why I will for the foreseeable future and why I think it's the best financial decision for me and a lot of people out there. So, a little bit of background here that you should know. I am 24 years old and I'm working as an aerospace design engineer. Now, a lot of people out there that immediately tells them, you should be buying a house. Why aren't you buying a house? You have a good income. You should be purchasing a house because that's the best way to build wealth and the best way to start building equity in a home. Specifically, I have heard this advice dozens of times from my older coworkers. As an engineer, I tend to work with older people around me, and so many of them have told me that I am just throwing money down the drain by renting. Even though I totally understand where they're coming from, I just don't think that it's accurate for my personal situation, my personal desires, long-term goals, short-term goals. I don't believe that the lifestyle of buying a home at this point will fit me. Now, the first reason that I currently rent an apartment, and likely the most obvious, is just price. The economies of scale of building an apartment complex are far greater than the economies of scale of building a single family home or just a few single family homes. The repetition of building the same unit, or at least very similar units, using the same materials, same styling, similar sizes over and over again, makes it far cheaper for the manufacturer to produce. This means that they can turn around and sell it at a profit for far less than they could if they were just building an individual home or a dozen homes. Now, one caveat here, a little note, is that I don't pay cheap rent by any means. We are on the upper scale of apartments in our area, not too far above the average because the average is decently high, but we are on the upper end of average rental prices for apartments in our area. However, when you compare that even to a modest house in this area, when you factor in the mortgage, HOA, lawn care, maintenance, property taxes, and everything else that goes along with owning a home, we're actually several $100s short of what it would cost us to purchase a normal home in our area, or even rent a normal home. Now, this isn't to say that if you were able to come up with a large enough down payment for a modest sized home in this area, you could more than likely reduce your payments significantly below what we're paying for this apartment. But being rather young, being 24 years old, not having been out of college for very long, it's not financially feasible to put a large enough down payment down that would reduce our payments significantly. Now, the second reason that we continue renting at this point is maintenance. I know it's a very common issue for why people decide to rent over purchasing a home, but any maintenance that comes up is essentially free. No out-of-pocket costs whatsoever. I'm sure that it's slightly factored into the rent payment, of course, but recurring payments along the way for anything that occurs in the home, we are not going to pay for. And another, I think, less considered but equally important factor of not having to deal with maintenance is the time that it saves you. Specifically, things like lawn care or complicated home repairs where you're having to learn how to do something you've never done before can easily take you hours and hours, sometimes every single week. For lawn care, for example, that's a recurring time you have to spend every single week or every single couple weeks working on. That's a significant time investment that at this age I would rather put into other things. Now, I'll discuss this a little bit more later, but that time savings with not having to worry about maintenance is a huge plus for renting. The third consideration for renting an apartment for us is the safety of it. We are in a single unit full of a building of 16 other units, so we know that we're surrounded by people at all times. If anything was to happen, there would guaranteed be somebody nearby that could hear us, see us, whatever it may be, and so we're always going to have that safety in numbers of people near us. Not to mention that we have an inside door on the second floor, so we can be guaranteed that nobody that's not supposed to be in here is going to be able to make it. They couldn't even make it into the hallway, let alone make it into the apartment. Now, of course, this won't be the same for all apartments everywhere. It's going to vary based on, of course, where you're living, how new it is, what kind of amenities it is, what kind of a building it is, what floor you're on. Those factors will vary, but in general, living in an apartment versus living in a home of equal quality and in the same area, you're going to be much safer in an apartment. The fourth reason is location flexibility. it is a huge bonus for us as younger people to be able to move in the future without any stress of having to sell a home, go through all the fees and the paperwork that come along with that, as well as going through all the paperwork and the payments on the other hand to buy the house in the location that we're heading to. We currently live in an area where we wouldn't want to stay in the long term. Now, because of current employment situations and considerations, moving isn't much of an option at this point, that we're at least a year or two away from being able to make that move. And so the idea of trying to purchase a house at this point would just be a massive amount of headache that we know we would only be using for a couple years until we had to go through that headache again with a new home. Now, the fifth and final, and for me, by far largest reason that renting is worthwhile is saving time. I mentioned the maintenance, I mentioned the paperwork that you have to go to. There's also tax considerations along the way. There is much more of a time commitment that's required for a house versus an apartment. All of the upkeep that you have to do along the way, upgrades that you're of course going to want to do along the way, maintenance like I mentioned, all of this will suck up a massive amount of time. This may seem like a pretty minor consideration, but for me, this is actually a huge consideration. As somebody, and I've talked a ton about this on this channel, as well as my other channels on Instagram and Twitter, I long-term want to leave my 9-to-5 day job, that engineering job that I mentioned earlier, and I want to transition over full-time to content creation, similar to what you're seeing now. Now, for me to be able to get that business off the ground, to get this business off the ground, requires a ton of time, as you can imagine, same as building up any business in the beginning. And so I would rather save the time now from owning a home, commit as much of that time as possible to building this business, building this brand, building up my income and location flexibility, time flexibility. And once I'm at a more comfortable point where I have enough income coming in, I have systems in place, I've been able to leave my 9-to-5, then I can commit to buying a home, knowing that I've already done all of the upfront work required, and now I just need to keep that wheel spinning. Now, of course, this will not apply to everybody. If you're somebody who's okay with living the life of a more structured 9-to-5 employment, or you've been able to get a business off the ground earlier on in life, or with a lower time commitment than most people, then buying a home early on in life is absolutely okay. I really hope you enjoyed this video and you were able to pull away some useful insights on my own decisions of renting versus buying, as well as applying those insights into your own decisions. If you enjoyed this content and want more like it, please feel free to like and subscribe down below. All of my other social media channels, as well as coaching, newsletter, ebooks, and all my other resources linked down below as well. But other than that, until next time, peace.